Hi, Bill.
Hi, Sandy. How are you? Giggling. Yeah.
Every time.
All right. What are we talking about today?
Okay, so the thing we're talking about today is art is artist.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Wow. We've spoken so many times now about how when we look at a piece of artwork, that we somehow innately understand the presence of an artist in that work.
Okay.
Sometimes not, but we have often spoken about it, and especially when we've talked about people like Charlotte Salomon, obviously, and in earlier recordings where we talked before about Tracey Emin, it struck me that sometimes it's actually impossible to separate the artist from their art. And I question whether we ever should. And I wonder if, when we're not aware of the artist, if they are in actual fact doing us a really great service by making room away from themselves in their work for us to somehow exist.
Okay. It's interesting though that I mean, go to the next slide if you like. It is interesting to me though that, yeah. Okay. So I guess my first question is, of course, artists are always in their art to some extent. Certain artists, like the two you mentioned that we're talking about, Tracey Emin today, the art that you think is very much them is also very autobiographical in a lot of ways. True, false?
Hang on, explain that to me. So I think the work is about Tracey Emin and it's autobiographical.
No, it's Tracey Emin autobiographical. It basically is when a person's art is essentially a journal or a diary of themselves or their own life or their experiences.
Yeah.
Is there a way for art to be specifically that artist without being autobiographical? Like, is there a line where it's like, okay, obviously it's Bill, it's a bunch of self-portraits of Bill, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, right? Is there a way to infuse yourself into art in such a way that there is no room for interpretation that isn't itself autobiographical? Does that make sense? It feels like the way that we've cleaved the world right now, it's, yes, of course, Jackson Pollock is in Jackson Pollock art, but like we don't really know what's in Jackson Pollock's head. We just get this weird abstract interpretation of what's in his head. And there's plenty of room in the middle for us to inject ourselves and blow up and fill that space. In work like this, it is very much almost like we're reading her diary.
You mean that we're excluded from it because it's not about us?
Yes. I'm saying, is there any middle ground? Is there oh, I definitely know this is Sandi Robertson, but this is not, a self-portrait of her life.
I don't know if it has to be middle ground. I would say that even when I look at this, for example, and I'm very aware that this is by Tracey Emin, and I'm very aware that the words and phrases that have been embroidered or appliqued onto the surface of this belong somehow to the life and times of Tracey Emin. They're still words that any one of us could have used or had used directed towards us. And I think because of that, even when it says the word Tracy, for example, it's not quite as simple as supplanting the word Tracy for the word or the name Sandi. But nonetheless, I am able to do that. So I don't need to look for a middle ground where it's absolutely not in any way about Tracey Emin to find myself. And nor do I have to have something that is completely abstract in which to feel confident that I can project my own thoughts and feelings.
You can sublimate yourself into her brain and kind of see it through their eyes, as it were, while still remaining yourself. So it's both them and you simultaneously.
Maybe, but though this makes me sound terribly, maybe it makes me sound terribly selfish or self-absorbed.
Okay, go ahead.
No, but I would say that we see ourselves in everything.
Yeah.
Don't we? To some degree or another, yes. But ultimately, we see ourselves in everything we register.
True. It's interesting, and I don't know if this is me and my Gen X New England American thing. But whenever I see...
You pigeonholing yourself there again, Bill, just for a second. Sorry.
Just for a second. Yes, I am. Whenever I see artwork like this, which is, what is the word I'm looking for? It's emotive. It's sort of, God, I'll come up with a better word. I read it and it feels self-indulgent to me. It feels like, yes, I understand you're going through all these things and you're pouring out what you have in your head. And this is maybe a picture of where you are. Maybe it's a pastiche of different things that you put together and you're creating this artwork. But to me, it feels too personal in some way. And I guess it's self-indulgent. It feels like, yeah, okay, great. Like, yeah, we've all been through lots of crap and we've all broken up with somebody and we've all XYZZZ, you know.
Why then do you love such schmaltzy love songs, Bill?
Because to me, true, good point. Because to me, those are universal in a way that this is not somehow.
Well, of course, those love songs are universal to you because you're in the universe. You are that universe, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think music is different than visual art. That's
a much bigger conversation, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think it is much more universal. So I mean, there is part of that feeds into this. Go ahead, sorry.
No, but if we stay with what we're talking about more specifically, to say that you don't maybe relate to this, therefore there's too much Tracey Emin in it for your taste.
Sure.
Doesn't mean that the rest of the world aren't.
Oh, of course not. Everyone can have their views and, it's just my opinion. I'm not saying I'm not taking it off the wall because I don't like it.
So you don't like it and you would take it off the wall is what I deduce from what you've just said.
I would take it off from my wall. If this was hanging on my wall, I would take it off and I would sell it and buy a very nice condo in the neighborhood next to mine.
But in context of the title, art is artist.
Yeah.
This does the job, no?
Well, it does, but that kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, which is, okay, yes, is it only art is artist? Is this art only her because it is so self-referential? That this is basically a self-portrait of her mind in a moment, which I guess all things are. But when you put words in it, it like makes it more ordinary to me.
Wouldn't it be dreadful if all of art was only about the things we directly understood ourselves?
No, I'm not saying that somebody else can't have a different view of it or somebody else can't have a different experience. What I'm saying is it feels, I don't know, this kind of stuff to me, just, I don't know, it feels ordinary. It feels pedestrian to me. Okay. It doesn't feel like art. It feels like, I don't know. I'm bad with words today.
Does it feel ordinary or does it maybe, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But I do want to understand you.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit with your notions of what art is. Right?
Yes, or the line that I put around what I think art is. Yes, true. Okay.
But can you explain why that is?
Because I feel like a million high school students do this kind of art every day.
Well, I know several hundred high school students who every year copy and pastiche the many photographers that I introduce them to.
Yeah.
I'm not just scoring points for the sake of it, Bill. I'm really trying to see this. And I want to know I want to know if there is a reason why
Well, I think, okay,
you, as
yeah.
Bill Wadman, with everything you are and you identify yourself to be, find that you're somehow not present in this. Because perhaps even just by looking, you're still participating in it somehow, aren't you?
Yes, by all of these sort of, I'm going to say something that's going to offend you, so gird yourself.
Okay.
By all kind of woo-woo definitions of art that we come up with, which is if you look at something or you see something or you experience something and it affects you emotionally or affects you in any way at all, then it is art. Yes, it fits within that. It's also, I will say that I am, which is ironic considering what I've been doing the last week, I am not a word person. I don't really think about the lyrics of songs. I don't read fiction. I don't enjoy poetry. So when a piece of art is very much literary based, my eyes glaze over. Like I can read it, but it kind of goes in one ear out the other, or in one eye and out the other ear. I don't know. Well, you know what I mean? But again, this is all just me. I guess what I'm saying is this feels confessional.
Oh, okay.
But in that way, it doesn't necessarily feel like it is inviting me to participate. It feels like someone shouting at me. If that
Just
makes
going to
any
read
sense.
something. Emin, who's now
Sure.
57, emphatically does not consider her life to be a work of art, which makes her polar opposites.
Wait, she doesn't consider her life to be a work of art?
No, but rather she makes work from life, but her life itself isn't the artwork. You know, there's some people who curate.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some people who curate their lives like art. I mean, we actually, we could cite in this same article, she goes on to talk about encountering Gilbert and George somewhere in Shoreditch. And they said, oh, can we carry your shopping for you? And so the two of them carried her shopping bags, and she was aware, as she was aware, they were aware instantaneously of how good it looked as a kind of trio walking up the street, Tracey Emin, flanked by Gilbert and George, carrying 2 bags of shopping. And
right.
that in itself, it was kind of almost immediately devised by them, because their art is their life and their life is their art. Whereas for Emin, life is life. And as an artist, she chooses then to record. And in the recording of her life, we get something that can perhaps appear confessional.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, in the word confessional, there's a barb there, that if we confess to something, it means we're guilty of something somehow. Yet, yet in making this work, I wonder whether Emin seeks to expose the ironies and hypocrisy of shame put onto us from others. Anyway, that's all very interesting to me personally. As you know, I love Emin's work. I really think that she is one of the most exciting artists of my lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm really listening to what you're saying, because I want to know in myself if it's because I do identify with these scenarios that are laid out for me by Emin.
Okay.
But I would hope actually that in the viewing of her work, I'm okay with it to be actually about Emin, much as I've said that I see myself in everything I view. Because there's also an element of, just being able to reach another, a sense of communality and of connection. And to have the information written out like this, of course it doesn't make more of this work than it would were an abstract painting, but it does give an immediacy and access to something very particular, the particular nature of the experiences that are recorded, or the fragments of experiences that we might believe ourselves to understand from this, don't have to align perfectly with my experiences for me to somehow think that I share in this?
I think, listen, I think that there are a number of reasons why the way that I feel about this kind of stuff has a lot to do with me and how I was raised and how I see the world and how I see life and how I see art. And to me, um, art is something that I do and I like put in the water and I let drift out to sea. It is not continually connected to me. I don't clip it onto my suit and wear it around with me all day long. But simultaneously, I do try to live my life in a way. I do not perform for other people, but at the same time, I try to live my life to where if I did watch it as a play, I would be proud of the things that the character did. But at the same time, I also don't think that everyone is all that interesting. I don't think the daily things of my life or the heartbreaks that I have or whatever it is, those are mine. That's fine. But like, no one else needs to know about that. No one else cares. You know what I mean? Like some of this stuff feels a little bit like, you know, what year was the last one?
96, 97.
Yeah. Okay. This feels like a prelude to social media to me.
Yeah.
You know, and all of the weird confessional stuff on social media makes me roll my eyes and say, who gives a crap? You know,
well, funnily enough, I'm the same with social media.
Yeah.
But
but if a fancy artist does it, then it's important.
Well, no.
Okay.
Not the thing you're talking about. I do want to again counter this sense that here we are. I'm talking to you, Bill Wadman, my friend, and I know that you actually are a word person. You do memorize lyrics. You do. You remember just before we started, we were talking about a movie. You memorized a line that was important to you.
It's a good line.
Yeah, but you're doing that all the time. But further to that, you and I have sat in these exact seats before listening to your pick of love songs.
True.
And those love songs are confessional.
Yeah.
But I'm going to
feel universal in a way.
Word for a second. You know, confessional implies the sense of guilt, right? Doesn't it?
I will go with you on, or certainly a sense of ownership.
I wonder why you have such a problem with work that reveals so much in this form and format when you, in fact, really love the songs that do the same thing. That's really interesting to me.
True. I feel like it's weird when it comes in a song, somehow it feels like they are speaking to just the person who's listening right now and not to everyone. Where with visual art, it just feels like they're shouting out into a crowd to me. Do
you never stand also something and believe it to be showing itself only to you?
I don't know. I know what you're saying. It doesn't happen to me all that often. But then again, I don't know. I'm a hack visual artist. So I don't think about things like that all that often. There's something you just said there. Wait, back up for a second. You said these things are confessional and you don't know why. Can you repeat? Like, I know you don't know exactly what you said, but there was something in there about that these people are basically bearing their soul kind of in some way.
I don't think I said those words, but
you didn't use those words, but like, I feel like that was I often think maybe people think that the things that they're feeling are bigger than they actually are because they're feeling them. You know, we all remember what it was like to be like a teenager and having your heart broken. And having your heart broken is never easy in life. But when your hormones are really raging as like a 16-year-old, like it's kind of way worse because you have no experience, no context. You have no reality that it's going to happen over and over again in your life because that's just life and life sucks and is hard. that there's like this self-importance to a lot of things that I just can't invest in. Not to say that some of the things that people say don't resonate with me. I don't know what it is. Yeah, it's weird. It's like I almost need my art to be more, words somehow take it out of context to me. Like it makes it, words make visual art uninteresting to me. Like if this, take this away, take all the words away and just leave the drawing in the middle, that's interesting to me. The words around it detract from the thing that's going on in the middle to me. They don't add to it. They cheapen it. It's like too obvious, too literal. If you're writing it out, then why are you trying to say it visually? Just get out a typewriter and type it. And have it be words. I don't know. It's mixed media stuff, maybe is what I'm not into. I'm a purist, Sandi. I'm a sad sack. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to take you off the thing. And this one's recent. This is 2019.
Yeah, but in her personal life, I mean, so much has gone on since then. It's quite fascinating, really, how we can trace the arc of what we know about an artist through their work, obviously, but also just knowing a little bit about personal life and what happens.
Sure.
Just before we get onto that, I want to go back to what you're saying about how the words take away and they detract, and linking in with the title, Art is Artist. I commune with the work. I read the words, I understand them. And I probably apply them to me. And so even when I read something that I don't have as a direct experience, in the application of them to me, putting them into my own kind of heart space, I guess, to feel those things that perhaps I want to feel in the moment of engaging with the artwork. There's a bit of a blur in the separation between Emin and I, or Emin and audience. Now, I know that
you commune with it, yeah.
I know not everybody does this, and I also know that there are many people who absolutely despise not just Emin's work, but actually Emin. And I think that's a really interesting phenomenon, and we've spoken about it before.
Sure.
Is that where the work by some people is celebrated and adored, of course, by others, it's hated and cast out. But in the hating and the casting out of the work, actually, people are really venomous about Emin as a human.
Is it now? And there are situations like with Terry Richardson or arguably Michael Jackson, where like there are people who are questionable people outside of their art, and therefore you can attack them and their art, or them separately, and just say, you know, Terry Richardson is a bad guy, whether or not I like their work. What you're saying, do you think that people don't like Tracey Emin personally because of the work that she makes?
Yeah.
You think it's just like a misogynistic thing? What do you think it is?
Well, I mean, I think that's an easy point to make, isn't it?
Right.
Right.
Sure.
But it is a point. It is a point. And I think because of the nature of the things that she describes in her work, she is dealing all the time with the projections of a very cruel patriarchal society in which a woman's sexual liberty, for example, is called into question repeatedly, in which a woman's body, as Barbara Kruger would say, is a battleground. A woman is so judged in her slovenliness. Whether that judgment is separate to how a male would be judged doing the same things or enacting the same activities, could we say? There's a high probability that the judgment would be different. I'm not even sure if that is what we're talking about in this particular show, but it's still relevant, isn't it?
Sure.
I would like to say that I don't need to defend Tracey Emin. She is one of the most successful artists of our time. So there are lots of people all over the place who do indeed really love what she does.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very, very glad of that. I'm very grateful, actually, for Emin as a presence. And it in many ways isn't me flying the flag for feminism or inclusionism or anything. It's actually just because, purely selfishly to me, she speaks about things in a way that's brave. She's so courageous. Now, women make work that's brave and courageous all the time. And I know that Emin has been written about with those words in close proximity all the time. But genuinely, that is what I think. Brave, courageous, and a pioneer, frankly. Standing on the shoulders of giants, yes, taking her cues from other artists who were working in similar ways right through the early machinations of the YBA movement. And before that, kind of proto-feminism and then into feminist art, the 1970s, what fertile ground from which she would have sprung, growing up in Margate, being very aware, self-aware. But art is artist. I'm not sure of really any other artist of our time who has certainly not the same fame as Emin, who's quite so linked or fitting for that title. Art is artist.
Yes. And it seems like you like that idea, though. You like the concept of, it is interesting, though, that she herself says that her life is not art. And yet you, at least in your mind, and a lot of other people certainly, but you certainly like the idea that she and her art are sort of one being.
And again, just going to read something further to that point.
Go ahead.
So this is an article that was written off the back of her work that was exhibited with Monk, I think, in one of her most recent exhibitions. Oh no, it was Emin's Royal Academy show confirms her as a great modern painter, a raw and inspired abstract expressionist. And yet she is also someone who lives her life, if not as art, then very close to it. Anything that happens to her can become a story, a video, a blanket, a neon text, or a media interview, another form of her artistic expression. She already had plenty to tell when she started showing what many called confessional art in her first exhibition at J. Jopling's White Cube in 1993. So am I wrong to see painting as her greatest achievement? Is the narration of her life, cancer and all, her true art? She, Tracey Emin, disagrees, saying that confession implies guilt. And so this is a quote from Tracey Emin. I say something and it's considered to be a confession. I'm not confessing that I had cancer. I'm not confessing I've got a urostomy bag. I have had cancer and I have a urostomy bag. It's a statement. It's a fact.
Sure.
So she sees her work as fact, not as confession. Anyway, this is the last image, and sure, it is an image of Emin with night bag.
Wait, can I just say one thing about the confessional? I understand what she's saying about the guilt thing. I think that we in English, at least, do not have another good word for somebody saying the things that most people just don't say out loud, which is what I mean by confessional. To me, it doesn't imply that there's anything wrong with those thoughts. It's just a question of whether or not those thoughts are anybody else's business or anybody else cares. Is sort of is my side of it. And I think that making art that is extremely personal is interesting, but I think that it detracts from its universality, right? It detracts from its having meaning in the larger humanity. You know what I mean? Because it is so personal, it feels like it only applies to the artist at that point, and therefore it's a small drop in an ocean that doesn't have an easy way to sort of impact society at large as much. It feels reactionary as opposed to exploratory. I don't know what I'm saying. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's
I'm in with Nightbag.
most lucid and interesting thing to say. And I understand. Yet, in the shared experience, I wonder if not my own experience, thank God, nonetheless, do I feel closer to this experience? Do I get a handle on the experience? Yes. Do I get a handle on Tracey Emin? Yes. Through the photographic representation, which is actually the reality, the fact, the statement, as she says herself.
Mm-hmm.
I question whether I simply passively look on, whether I participate, whether I really understand.
Do you think there's part of it that, and I don't mean this to be accusatory or negative in any way, I'm honestly asking, do you think that in some way there's a sense that, oh, she's saying some of the things I wish I could say or wish I had the words to say, and therefore there's a connection to it in a somebody speaking my language, or somebody saying the things that I can't say or don't want to say or don't know how to say, and therefore I'm picking up on it, and so it becomes to you autobiographical. You know what I'm saying? Like, because the whole blurring kind of thing is there an element to that, to where maybe because so much of her work does have a very feminist twist to it, that I can't identify with it as well as you can, and maybe that's an element of it. I don't need to hear the things that she says, or maybe I need to hear them, but I'm not looking to hear the things that she says, or maybe you are looking for somebody to say the things that she's saying.
It's an excellent point. I think it's so valid.
I don't know.
I would still go into art is artist. Well, art is audience.
Right. So maybe it's her art is you as a viewer. And that's why it, resonates.
But again, I come back to this point that not everything that's happened in Tracey Emin's life is relatable.
True.
In that, for example, her most horrific botched abortion that totally traumatized her. Thankfully, not everybody's been through that experience. Thankfully, not everybody's had bladder cancer.
Right.
Yet, through her showing us the fact, bringing it close to us, it's simplistic to say, well, it raises awareness of what's going on and what's happened.
Yeah.
And blah, blah,
but
blah.
I don't think that's what she's going for.
No, I don't.
No.
I think that it's about a real deep engagement of the artist with the fact, and that when we look together at those facts, we may somehow become.
It's interesting when it's funny that you should say become like that. I wrote a really short film script where a guy is speaking to somebody who's breaking up with him because he's not good enough for the other person. And he says that, you're there. I have to sit there and watch you becoming. And the person who was going to read it, my friend Simon, who was going to read it for me, was like, I don't understand this line. And I was like, oh, becoming, as an actual verb, like as a, a statement. And he's like, oh, I see. And so it's interesting that you would use that term, but it is also interesting to me that she is saying that my life is not art, but in some ways, all art can be our experiences that we've had. Moments of our lives can be art. Mm-hmm. Maybe the whole of our lives is not art, I don't know. How old is she now?
It's great that we don't know, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Come out for 59, probably.
50.
I think she's born in 63.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is that, Emin has had experiences that can be described as maybe a modern female experience of maybe, let's say, multiple sexual partners and a sense of being watched, watched in that, of being loved and then rejected, of feeling desire and then repulsion, of having an abortion, of not having her own children, for example. These are all things that, very much part of modern Western female phenomena.
Yeah.
And is she playing to kind of like a zeitgeist of post-feminism? Again, I don't think so. I think she's being herself, and the fact of it becomes the record. Art is artist.
Do you ever think that being artist is also exploitative of yourself?
At least it's of yourself.
Like that there's an element of prostitution in there. I don't mean it like trying to equate female with prostitution, just like that you're literally like, this is me, this is my life, and I'm basically going to talk about it in public for gain. You know what I mean?
I mean, again, we come back to there is a parity. You're going to write a love song.
Yeah.
You're going to write great literature about the challenges of living. Are we all prostituting ourselves? Well, maybe we are, in which case, yes, let's all be bunched in together.
Yeah, it's I was listening to an interview with Diane Warren. You know her? She's a songwriter. She wrote, well, everything. She's like the most successful songwriter of the last 30 years. And half the songs that have ever made #1 hits in the last 30 years were actually written by Diane Warren. And she famously has not been in a relationship since 1993. And she herself says that she's never been in love. And yet she's written all of these love songs that have, changed popular music. Yeah, I don't know. It is an interesting, there's some sort of way of denoting the differences that I can't quite verbalize, that I'll have to think about. We'll have to talk about another time.
It's a tricky one.
It's interesting because I can look at this image, and there are probably some people who would put this image in a pile with Nan Goldin with a black eye or whatever it is. I wouldn't at all put it that way. I can't stand Nan Goldin work. This I'm all right with, because there's no choice in her having cancer. You know what I'm saying? Where Nan Goldin was with somebody who beat her and then took pictures of it. It's like, why are you letting yourself get beat? Like, that doesn't, it's like, just, I know. And there's a lot more to it, but like, leave the room, like get out of there, get out. Cause it's happened before and it's going to happen again. Just do something about it. Where Tracey Emin, it's not like she can just say, well, as long as I do X, Y, Z, I will no longer have cancer anymore. This is sort of something that's happened to her versus anything that sort of like she had anything to do with. And so to me, it's a different thing.
But this is where we've come to, right? And you're talking about this in context of this image. But you wouldn't maybe say the same things about this, or the unmade bed, or the tent, or.
True. Mostly because I look at these and I read the words and I think anybody could have written this.
Exactly.
In the sense that, like,
before you've just blown your own argument out of the water, Bill.
How do you mean?
Anybody could have written this. Exactly. You said before that she's made it too specific to herself.
Well, no, what I'm saying is they're not specifically contradictory. What I'm saying is anyone could have written this in the sense that, like, this doesn't actually tell me anything. This is just like the drivel that it's like, basically this could say up at the top, I'm hungry. And it's like, well, yes, everyone's been hungry. So what are you actually telling me? You see what I'm saying? Like it's that kind of stuff that drives me crazy. It's pedestrian. It's like the sentiments are pedestrian. They don't actually get society anywhere. It doesn't actually say anything other than the fact of yelling, I'm just like everybody else. I've had all these terrible things happen to me, and I've had my heart broken, and I've had people be jerks, and I've had what it's like, yeah, okay, great. That's super. Like, but that it feels like somebody having a tantrum, not somebody actually speaking to me. Again, I like the illustration in the middle. I'm going to get lots of negative press on this one.
Well, if everything you say is true, then you know how much I love you. You must know how afraid I am. Because I will believe what you say, because I trust you.
Well, I try to be honest on here. I don't pull my punches.
Thank goodness that I don't think Tracey Emin will give two shits what you and I think.
No. And, if I ever meet her and she punches me, that's fair.
You might, she's quite wild.
I don't know. I might have to punch back. Let's go.
I think we need to finish there, Bill.
You're going to make this happen?
No, this is like the moment where if we were on television, someone would have cut the interview.
No, I just, I don't know. I simultaneously think art is the only important thing that we do as humans.
Yeah. And
also simultaneously think that all of it is a bunch of like, whatever, doesn't really matter. We're all going to die anyway. So it's like I have this very contradictory view that it's the only thing in human history that actually means anything after we're dead. But you know what? We're all going to die anyway. So who really cares what anybody says or does while we're alive? And I took a long walk through the cemetery just before this, and I just realized tens of thousands of people all around me, and no one knows any of their names. No one knows what any of them did. They all lived and they died, and it's okay. Eventually, everybody is just some guy. It's just some guy theory of life, including myself.
But for now,
yeah.
And not for me, you're not just some guy, you are Bill Wadman.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing Speaking of Seeing with me as a project.
Sandi, it's like the thing that I look forward to every Thursday.
Bye, Bill.
Bye, Sandi.